Hi guys, Sophie Sewell-Njie here. I'm just waiting for more people to join the live. Yeah, tonight I want to talk about food prices. The cost of living is just too high. Um, we heard a lot of promises running up to the last year's elections, how things would start getting better. Obviously, the Tories lost because they'd wrecked the economy. Um, Everyday essentials are shot through the roof, and that is food and energy in particular. And it doesn't seem that it's stemming anytime soon. So this evening I was watching TikTok, and I saw a video where this guy had walked to the back of a high street shop, and in the bin, it was filled up with edible food. And the thing that made it worse was obviously, you have families that are really struggling, individuals that are struggling um, to basically get the basics. Because one thing that I've noticed is since we've had the cost of living crisis, shops may look full, but as you're going around, there's a lot of items that are missing, right? And the prices are just far too high. They're ridiculous. Can't remember a time in my life that food was so expensive. And the other thing is that you're getting less food for your money. However, it seemed that this supermarket had reduced for the food price, but not enough. It should be like a kind of a countdown thing whereby at a certain time in the shop, the prices are going to be lowered, and they keep on lowering it so they can sell as much as they can. And if they can't on perishable goods, then basically they need to have some form of scheme. Like they do have like one called like the odd box, or it would be for food that needs to be sold to reduce the amount of waste going into landfill. Um, and I just thought it was really disgusting because we've got things like the 2 child cap for child benefit, where larger families, poor larger families, um, only don't get any subsidies when it comes to food for the rest of their children. I mean, this is just a meanness to the extreme where food is just gone to waste, and it could have actually been donated, or there could have been a call out just to tell people to come and get the food, not throw it in a bin. So they want people to be like scavengers going through bins to get food out of them. Well, what about this? What if there's certain regulations whereby food has to be in a certain price range, right? Um, so that less food gets thrown away. It's meant to be consumed. So it seems that we've got waste in the countryside because there's not enough people going to pick the food. And then we've got um so we've got people, so we've got a shortage of labour, indigenous labour here, to actually go in the fields and pick the fruit. So there's wastage there. And then with processed foods and other types of food is getting thrown away that could have been brought if the prices were decent. Now, you see, there are like bargains with these loyalty cards where you get a discount or get points off. And you can see that the prices are considerably cheaper if you're in a loyalty card. Whereas years before, up until COVID, right, it wasn't kind of like a mandatory thing, even though it's not mandatory. The fact is that there's more bargains if you actually become a member of their loyalty cards than if you're just shopping and you haven't got any cards. And I don't see why supermarkets must have data on everything that we do. You know, you can get data from things that we're buying, right? You don't necessarily have to have it catered for everybody, getting everybody's information. But more importantly, the food prices are too high. And the market's determining that because people cannot or will not pay exorbitant prices for less food than they would have got 3 or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And it just seems that this situation isn't being dealt with. It's just continuing. And it's wrong. There's no justification to throw away food when there's so many needy people who need to eat. You know, how many children went to bed um, tonight, earlier on tonight, with a hungry belly? You've had people working in after school clubs or different club summer schemes or whatever, and they are not getting properly paid because they are actually subsidizing the projects because certain children can get free food. In one family, say there's 5 children, there's only 2 children whose food's subsidised, the other 3 have to look. Now, if you're a person of conscience, how can you be distributing food or serving out food to children and some are getting the food, they're all hungry, some can be fed and others can't? I mean, this is ridiculous. It's really bad. But Britain always seems to have money for war. It always has money for war. But why hasn't it got money for food? For example, a family size family size crisp bag, for example. So you get 6 Walker's crisps. When you open up the packets, right, there's like a quarter of the crisps in the packet. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's more expensive than it was before. And this is just an example, not just putting out that company, but it's just an example of what's going on. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, was Brexit, the reason for Brexit was to basically hike up food prices? Is that what people actually voted for? at the particular time, because Brexit just meant Brexit. That means it could have meant anything. But what it is that everything is, there's less of everything and it's more expensive and more food is going to waste. And it's just terrible. There's loads of terrible things going on in the world, but certain things in Britain is not being actually tackled, and it's got nothing to do with migrants. It's got everything to do with the management and the regulations, right? That are making British people suffer unnecessarily. Because this is some political ideology. What is it? The reinvention of the serf. This is craziness, really, and something really needs to be done about it. It's all right flying around the world and trying to solve this crisis and that crisis and being the big statement. What about the future generation and the population having proper nutrition, which would obviously cut down um, the hospital waiting list for a start, and that's another thing. Yes, if you've got poor nutrition, obviously your immune system is going to be compromised as such that you're going to start getting diseases and becoming ill, which will put more pressure on the NHS. And what's happening to those waiting lists? Apparently, people who have been waiting for procedures have been struck off the list because they failed to pick up a text message. Now, when have our phones been just wide open when we know we can get viruses and different things, or you've got scammers on the phones and stuff like that? People do have security on their phones, so they don't just pick up random phone calls. So if urgent message, which you don't know is urgent, is trying to come through, it would be blocked anyway, right? So a lot of people on the list apparently have been notified, but obviously they got protection on their phone. What happens to sending like emails, or yeah, the more expensive thing is using the post, but I'm sure they can do a deal with the post office. Do you know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. This place has just got from bad to worse. And the other thing is, they brought in this thing called the smell test, because there was a lot of, when we had just in time, that's when food, you had the use by date and the sell by date on products. Um, and before, people obviously, if the use by date is a certain date and they haven't used it, they'll throw it away, and more food went into landfill when sometimes the food was okay. And then when it came to the energy crisis, things like tariffs, that is imposed by government. That isn't imposed by the energy company. And yet still those prices aren't. Plus it looks like energy companies get confused because they think they're in the banking sector, where it comes to hoarding our money, or issuing bills that are just basically guesstimates, right? Estimated bills, and not being more transparent about their actual charges so that people aren't paying too much to them. And then they want to keep the credit and not automatically reimburse the customer. These kind of things need to be looked at, because from systems working efficiently to them having a problem every single month with bills, it doesn't make sense. Something is not right. The system's been like teetering on like autopilot, and nobody's really checking what's happening. And initially with Brexit, we did have problems where it came to logistics and the paperwork that was needed for importation, exporting goods to Europe. And all right, you could say that's teething problems because nothing was really thought out properly. But this is like 5 years on, and if Britain is working again, we've got a new government. It's meant to be putting things right, right? They're talking about vacancies and stuff like that. Maybe there should be more vacancies in those particular areas to actually make the system work, right? And also to have eyes looking at these companies that are just dealing with extortion, because food shouldn't be this high, and it looks like it ain't going down anytime soon. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it needs to change. We have to invest in the younger generation. You have to make sure that baby formulas are, if necessary, subsidized for poorer families so that children actually get the nutrition they actually need. I mean, Britain had that kind of under control until people just wanted to just wreck the system, pull everything out, and put it into private hands. And the private hands don't know what they're doing, just like with the PPE. No, they didn't know what they were doing. They're getting massive contracts, but didn't even have the experience or the know-how to deliver those things. And what did that actually cost? A whole heap of lives died because of that, both medical staff as well as patients. It's just ridiculous. Now, we haven't got, COVID's around, but it obviously there's no pandemic of it. But what about the other things? Can I understand that was emergency and once in a lifetime thing or generation phenomenon or whatever happened at that particular time. But that subsided. And what about so called normality? Right? There's certain things that need to be in place to make sure that the basics in life are actually covered. That is not stripping everything away from the poor and stripping everything away from the other, whether that other is disabilities or, any kind of difference. What about the nitty gritty? The things that need to be there in place. Yeah. So that, it helps money to run as well. It helps the economy to start ticking over, trying to get these solutions for these challenges. You know, people get employed to do things like that. Government pays people to do that or gives out contracts for companies to do it or whatever. It's all a part of social economics, isn't it? It's you're just thinking, what the hell are politicians for? Are they just for war? Or are they for benefiting their country, improving on things, instead of making things harder than they actually should be? I mean, people will go so far as throwing away food and putting bleach over it so others can't get it. What about instead of them putting their the items that they couldn't actually sell on that particular day um, in a certain part of the shop and alert the public um, that there is food there. And if they see a demand, obviously, if they want to sell it at a cheap price, very cheap, rock bottom, because it's the end of the day. Just like in markets, perishable goods are gonna go to waste. The trader has to deal with that waste. But say half an hour before closing up or whatever, there's going to be a flash sale and they're practically giving it away because otherwise they've got to chuck it away. Um, Somebody really needs to just tackle these problems because it's just ridiculous. You've got people sleeping on the road, right? Outside of these shops, because they've got nowhere else to go. you know, they would be like the first people who hand it out to food. Here's some food to eat. Everybody needs it. But we know that food, as we can see in the Middle East, particularly in Gaza, is being used as a weapon. We see those people um, just being demoralized, dehumanized, trying to eat like we all do. All human beings, as we know, stating the obvious, must eat. If we don't eat, we're dead, isn't it? Right? And you've got Palestinians that are just or unalived for TikTok. We need some sense. I mean, like, is there anybody out there that has got some kind of decency and having respect for other human beings and their dignity? Because can anybody imagine really doing that? Having to do that? It's just criminal. And so is chucking away edible food. It's not even saying that back in the day, for example, with school meals in the 70s, when I was in school in Berkshire, right? What would happen was the food waste from the whole of the school would go into a vat or small vats, and a lorry would come and pick them up and distribute them to farms so like the pigs could eat the food, right? It wasn't just chucked in landfill. So just imagine they're chucking food with plastic on it into landfill. I mean, even with domestic waste in this country, we have to sort it out, don't we? Yes, you've got your black bin for like all the plastics. You've got your food bin for the food to be put in. You've got your recycle bin or bag that you put all your recyclable goods in, right? The rubbish isn't all just put together; it's separated. But why are um, these supermarkets? Why haven't they got the same thing? Why haven't they got industrial um, bins, including the recycling, the plastics, and the food? Because from what I saw was everything just went into a black industrial bin. It was just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And bear in mind, it is actually the summer holidays, and there's a lot of families that are really struggling in the holidays to feed their children. And the sooner they get rid of that two-child cap, the better, because all that is doing is creating more and more poverty. And no wonder mental health is actually on the rise, because if you're stressed out like that, you're going to get sick. It's not right. It's definitely not right. And I'm talking, all right, it may be happening in other countries, but right now I'm just talking about the UK, all right? Because we can go on like everything's hunky dory and know, there's no serious issues or whatever going on if you listen that in this country, whereas everything's more important what's going on abroad. Or obviously we have the whole kind of attitude of distraction and blaming the others for everything. And this is not othering. This is a British problem. And these so-called career politicians need to get some policies together to tackle things properly so that Britain can start to move again. People in Britain can start planning what they're doing and stuff like that. And it's difficult if you're waiting on a waiting list for a procedure, right? And the list ain't moving. How you meant to get people into work? You know, they wanted to get rid of PIP the other day, but really and truly, people who want to work and who are on PIP are also in the line for operations, different medical procedures, and it doesn't seem that the list's moving. It's just a tick box exercise, but what really is happening? You have to get the thing moving. What is the problem? We've had a lot of doctors leave the NHS because they couldn't get their visas extended or they couldn't get their families over because of the racist sentiment within this country where they don't want foreigners coming in here, when foreigners do a whole heap of the work, right? Up and throughout medicine and in different sectors. The caring, the social care and health care has a lot of people from all over the world working in it. And if it didn't, it would have collapsed. That's the reality. And why can't those doctors, nurses, carers, etc., bring over their family members? They're human beings, they have families. Their parents or carers raised them, they invested in them so that they could do their studying and get to a point where British can actually grab them and get them here. And they can kind of hit the floor running with their expertise. And it costs Britain absolutely nothing. What about benefits of migration? We never hear that. We're just always hearing the negative. We want to hear something more positive about the direction that this place is actually going in. You know, international affairs are one thing, and obviously we're in an interconnected world. At the same time, you have to look locally. What are you doing locally to solve these situations that have been piled up for years? At least start looking at the solutions and putting in the plans and communicating with the people of the country so we know exactly what's going on. That, you know, this government here has got a vision and this is where it wants to take this ship for this particular at this particular time. Instead of jumping from one crisis to another. Um, that's got nothing. Well, Britain, whatever, however it's justified, it shouldn't take away about domestically improving what needs to be improved. Because come off of it, by the time the next election, as it's coming up to the next election, nobody's going to be voting Labour if things haven't changed. Because that's what people voted for to change. And nothing seems to be changing, especially when I'm seeing today food just being chucked away with ridiculous prices on it. You know, for people's staple food, ridiculous prices. Absolutely terrible. So this is my rant. Um, I just thought it was absolutely disgusting. You know, the people just need a better deal, and children definitely need a better start in life, especially poor children. You know, because when they grow up, they be contributing. You know, um, but if they, I mean, it must be terrible. Like things are meant to get better for future generations, not get worse. What is this? Seeing having the kids in the workhouse because it's ridiculous. Absolutely, it's just been more of the damn same. Or austerity. Britain didn't even have to go down the path of austerity when that recession hit in '08 or economical downturn. Um, I remember, was it the Icelandic banks went down first? And at that time, you had councils investing in stocks and shares in other countries and stuff like that. And I remember, was it Slough Council went bankrupt or something because it had put some money in the Icelandic bank and then that crashed. And obviously, they wanted to get their money back. And Iceland made a decision. It just said, look, we have to go to our people to see whether or not they would like us to repay the loans, foreign loans, or do they want us to settle our economy, sort it out first? And their people said they wanted them to sort it out first. But the difference between the Icelandic people was, as I think it was the president at the time, said that they, unlike Britain, are a true democracy. They have to go to their people and ask the people what they want them to do. And their people said they wanted them to sort out the Icelandic economy first. And they sorted out their economy and they put their bankers in jail and they came out of that recession before any other country in Europe. So, right, and they didn't go through austerity. So, austerity is a political ideology. And with all the austerity that Britain has had, is it any better off today than it was at the start of it? At the start of it, checking that one, food prices were lower, energy was lower. Do you know what I mean? Since then, with all these things, and now we have the fiscal policy or whatever it is, red lines and that. I mean, come on, you make these fiscal rules. If they don't work, you have to change them, innit? Because if the rule isn't working, the rule isn't working. We just want things sorted out. For example, energy companies, don't know whether they're being hacked or what, can't generate the bills that they used to generate properly. It always seems to be some hiccup where it comes to estimated bills and stuff like that. Whereas before, it would just flow. What's been going on? We're having lack of information from everywhere, from different corners. Um, yeah, it's ridiculous. And also, there's been um, a lot of nurseries back in the day, not too long ago actually. You know, obviously, when it comes to the cost of nurseries, they're really expensive. However, there's not enough births because loads of nurseries are being closed down. Loads of schools are being closed down. There's not enough children. In London, there's a lot of empty classrooms. In my borough alone, there's like 4 or 5 primary schools that have been closed down. And not just this borough, loads of other boroughs, the same kind of things are happening. So it'd be interesting as well when they're talking, we hear about migrants coming into the country, but we don't hear about the people that have left. How many people that have left this country? Because school places, it used to be very difficult at one stage to get a school place because of the high birth rate, like in the 90s and stuff. And now it's the opposite. There's not enough children, so schools can't run. And obviously, cost of living has affected that because it's too expensive to have children for people. And sometimes it's, you know, the opportunity is gone. Or because rents are so high or mortgages are so high, the housing crisis, that's also impacted the birth rates. All these things have knock-on effects, and they haven't been thought out properly, these different policies, especially when they're rooted in bad-mindedness and lies. That those seeds don't germinate properly. Do you understand? Like having a positive outcome. They were negative in their intention to do these things, and the result has been more negativity. So then it comes to the fact if there's less births, there's more elderly people. And then when it comes to the productivity, the more productive generations, like people in their school leavers, young people, so from 18 to like 30 then, they're productive. And going on to 40, 50s, a bit less, and until you get to the other end, right? But those people between 18 and 40 then, say, those are the ones that we're going to need because they're productive, more productive, physically, mentally, more productive. And it's difficult for them to get somewhere to live. At some point, it's nice to live with your family if you're coming from a family that you're okay in. Um, but, at some point, you have to fly the nest. And they're looking for nesting and they can't find anywhere cheap enough to just start putting their foot on the ladder of establishing their independence and wanting to build their own families if that's what they choose to do. Um, and it's down to like policies that haven't been thought out and grounded in greed and jealousy and a whole heap of bad mindedness because it wasn't really for the benefit of the country, it was for individuals' benefits for their pockets. And it's a mess. So, yeah, I feel a bit more relieved. No, it really pissed me off today, to tell you the truth, to see that. Because I remember, was it about uh, around '09? I remember being outside of a bakery shop on a Saturday, and I was working in a market, and it really disgusted me when I saw these big, I don't recall them, like containers anyway on wheels, some weedy stuff they have in the supermarkets, and they were just putting out loads of bread, right? But instead of giving it away, because there's, again, poor people or homeless people who need something to eat, they put it out and then they would just pour bleach over it. And you just think, these people are wicked. Because if you gave it away to somebody, what would that possibly do to them? It's obvious that if people are going for it, they must need it. And it's obvious that the shop didn't want it. So why put bleach over it? And that was before there were such things as the food banks. But again, I would put to it as a solution. When things start to work, there should be, as a target, they like to give targets, a reduction in food banks will actually represent the progress of lowering the cost of living. Because if you check it, before the Tories changed, put that two-child cap on the benefit, families were given money for all their children on child benefit. And that helped to subsidize fuel bills, clothing, food. Family budgeted their money all right, they'd be okay. They might not have everything they want, but the basics were covered. It was sad to see or hear that, and see it, like in the supermarket where you have certain foods have got security on them, and one of the first ones was baby milk. I'm just thinking back in the day, if a person was on benefits, they would actually have milk tokens and take the milk token to the clinics and the health centres, and the health centres would give, maybe one or two baby milk containers. Never saw or heard of people like trying to steal baby milk from the shops, they weren't put in that position. It's just wickedness. Absolutely wickedness. Yeah, I really think that these issues need to have more coverage, because a lot of things happening. There's a lot of changes and improvements that need to take place, and there needs to be more focus on those. Balance between the local and international situations, because it seems the international situation's overshadowing everything, and really it can't be kicked into the long grass all the time and put off for the next government to come in, and then the next one comes in, they put it off again for the other one to come in, and in the meantime, what happens to the people? Um, yeah, yeah, I'm aware that there's cost of living crisis around the world, but I just think that um, it's a bit too convenient. Why is it happening all around the world? And then maybe how we look at this globalization thing, we need to look at it. We need to look at it in a different way, because I think it needs to be more local to local. Like, countries need to be able to have their own food security, in the sense of they need to produce food. So if anything happens in the world market, there's always a buffer. You're not depending on your food coming, thousands of miles away, um, for produce that you can actually grow in your country as well, just in case anything happens. And also maybe looking at curriculums when it comes to schools, where and in higher further and higher education, where it's you have vocational um, classes in horticulture, how to grow your own food, um, as a buffer. You don't have to have tons and tons of land, but maybe you can grow a little kitchen garden that you'll consume. Um, you know, and also teach children about the earth and being able to look after it and different things. I just think there needs to be a bit more creativity and imagination to get the youth engaged into green industries, and yeah, and the whole thing about life skills. in general, um, so that they can help themselves even if things are difficult. They have the skills. It doesn't mean like, say, you're wearing a jumper and it's got a hole in it, right? It doesn't mean that you have to throw it into landfill. If you get some wool and a needle, you can sew it up, or needle and thread, but they need to know how to sew. Just like they need to be able to cook. Because you had generations that weren't even taught how to cook, and then they're in a situation where they need to cook. But then again, saying that, it's the first time with this energy crisis that something I've just said simply would apply, but it doesn't really apply with the energy, the cost of energy, and depending on what your income is. Because cooking hot food can be expensive depending on what your budget is. Um, but luckily, technology is catching up with this, and there are gadgets. And as time goes on, no doubt their prices should be lowered. Where people are making the switch from like the gas or the electricity to be using like air fryers and different things, to be able to cook more energy efficiently. And, maybe in the future there'll be more of those gadgets, that reduce the amount of energy plus the price, so people can have other ways, of, you know, tending to their needs. Um, yeah, I think like the curriculum needs to be sort of fit for purpose instead of all the ideology of it of 1950s Britain and rare, 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 rare. It needs to be practical, like in the sense of that people can actually fend for themselves, get some kind of independence because they've been taught the skills that they can actually go and do something with them and benefit themselves and their families. Because it's not about everything is book learning necessarily. You've got hands. You need some form of movement to be able to create things. And obviously, food is fuel. So obviously, people need to have a full stomach in order to function properly. And this is the other upsetting thing that we're subjected to around, I can't say all the world because I don't know what all the world is doing, but a lot of us around the world are being bombarded with images of people not being able to get any food. And if we had our way, they would be eating right now. But yet still, we are having to observe these atrocities. And, there's just a whole thing about food. It's just like crazy. And the waste. And we really need to tackle that waste and distribute food a bit more evenly, and there be less of it. Um, I just wanted to know if any of you have got anything to contribute to this. I'd be happy to hear what you think, whether you've got solutions or maybe you might see it in a different way. Or where you're coming from in the world, are you going through a similar situation? Does anything that I've said um, sound familiar, or maybe where you are in the world is not really affecting you, the cost of living? Um, Maybe your countries have come up with different solutions um, to the cost of living. Because when was it? I think it was 22. I think in 22, um, yeah, I think it was Germany and Italy had introduced really cheap train fares so that their people could travel around the country for a fixed price at a bargain. And it was to stimulate their economy because obviously where people go, they spend some money and make contacts, maybe do a bit of business or just partake in businesses. And that helped to keep the economy moving there. Where it came to energy, um, I think France made sure that energy companies didn't charge have more than a 4% increase on energy. Um, Whereas Britain's just went through the roof. So again, it's like certain things are not tested before they're implemented or thought through. And it's kind of ironic because at the time during COVID and just before the time of COVID, they were talking about um, not not wanting experts. There was no place for experts. They could just do everything. And we can see with like Brexit and how that was handled, there was no experts involved. So just imagine if there was, it couldn't be any worse than it turned out to be. And likewise, with this food strategy, no experts involved, just business. Um, and no regulatory body to make sure that they ain't chucking away food and people are hungry. Anyway, I've had my rant, so I'm going to love you and leave you. And I'd like to thank you for showing up. And hopefully, next time, I can hear some of your voices and what you've got to say. That's all for now. Good night. Bye.